They say it's out there, the creature, deep within the forest, deep within the depths of the swamp. And I'm gonna find it. Friend or foe, I aim to find out, but I know it's out there, and I am going to find it. I'm gonna find what haunts these woods, if it's the last thing I do. But for now, it's getting pretty damn cold out here. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to AnTalk, the weekly comic-con-versation. So I got out of the swamp, out of the cold, made it to this shack, and my host here has been generous enough to offer me some of the food he's been working on. And in the meantime, we've been talking about comics. And what I want to know is, what is your favorite horror comic book? I also want to talk about Swamp Thing, published by DC Comics, specifically Volume 1 or Book 1 of Alan Moore's run. Yes, the legendary Alan Moore, writer of classics like Watchmen, Killing Joke, V for Vendetta. Well, this is back before those huge titles, and his run on Swamp Thing helped propel him to that next level. And this has to be one of the best horror comic book storylines of all time. Swamp Thing, the DC character, was created by writer Len Wein and artist Bernie Wrightson. Swamp Thing's first appearance was in House of Secrets, issue 92 in the year 1971. Originally, Alex Olson, then updated to Dr. Alec Holland, was a scientist caught up in a lab explosion where he was blasted into the swamp, burning and covered in chemicals, and transformed into the Swamp Thing. Basically a humanoid creature made of swamp and plant matter. To me, it's kind of like that old popular classic concept of swamp creature or creature of nature, kind of like Creature from the Black Lagoon. So an obvious character choice, but over the first several years of his comic book existence, it struggled to find popularity and started becoming somewhat of a mess. So they gave it to Alan Moore to reboot it more or less how he wanted. So he took over around issue 20 of the Saga of the Swamp Thing, and what he did with the character and how he altered the origin was pretty unique, very creative, and this is a really good run. I've always heard it was pretty good, but finally reading it for myself, I was quite impressed. And I'm only talking about book 1 of Alan Moore's run right now. So I'm not going to get into too many spoilers about what happens, but I am going to hit on what Alan Moore did to his origin, which I don't think happens until like issue 2 in this. But I'm going to hit on that and some other key points that happen throughout the storyline. So if you don't want anything spoiled, I do recommend this to anyone. Go read it right now. But other than that, let's get into it. Like I said, Swamp Thing is a DC character, but if you go out and try to find the book, you'll probably find it under Vertigo Comics, which is owned by DC. It just handles their more mature content, which this definitely is. And we can't start talking about this without talking about how great of a horror comic it is, because it really holds true to that. There are many horror elements that come through in many ways, and a lot of it is supernatural and whatnot, but still comes from these very real concepts that can be very scary in real life. Finding your humanity or sense of purpose, nightmares, even alcoholism to a degree, and much more. And there's also a heavy presence of sci-fi, and it really adds to the overall tone. But what really makes the book for me is the artwork, which I think is just absolutely beautiful. It's so well done, and they nail the tone in every single panel. With all the art and color being done by Stephen Bissett, John Totleben, and Tatiana Wood. And if I got any of those names wrong, I apologize. It's hard when you've never heard them out loud. But nonetheless, they do such a great job creating the atmosphere for this story. And it complements Alan Moore's writing so well. It's scary, it's beautiful, it's whatever it needs to be, and the artwork alone is worth the price. Even all the covers, which they have in the book, are all very well done. And Alan Moore has such a way with writing and words, not just how creative his ideas are, but how there's never just one layer to anything he writes. Usually there are metaphors or undertones and themes to his characters and stories. I love how he describes things. He writes like he's writing a novel, but never to where it's too much text. The way the words and the art flow together made this a very enjoyable read, and I kind of think that's the key to comic books in general, is when the writing and the art come together in such a way that when you read it, it's very easy and you just get in this flow in your head. And that's not as easy as it seems, and this book really seems to do it better than a lot. So what we have here is a very well written story with beautiful artwork that hits a perfect blend of horror, sci-fi, and the world of superheroes, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially around the Halloween season. As I said, this book has a lot of horror in it, and there's basically two storylines with kind of like two different antagonists over the course of this book. The first involves the Floronic Man and has a lot to do with Swamp Thing's origin. So as I said, Moore took over as Swamp Thing around issue 20, and the story starts off with basically the death of what seems to be Swamp Thing's nemesis up to that point, and then introduces a new story and characters, as well as including older characters. I didn't look into the previous issues or what came in the series before this. I didn't feel the need to, and honestly, I don't think it's necessary for anyone to do to be able to enjoy this. In fact, it might even hinder the experience. But killing off what seemed to be the main villain pretty much shows Alan Moore was not playing around when he wanted to do this his way. Also, right off the bat, Swamp Thing is being chased down by a task force who do shoot and presumably kill him. And this is because a powerful, wealthy man named Sunderland and his people are interested in the work of Alec Holland and want to study his mutated body. Enter the character Jason Woodrue, a scientist with a specialty in botany and the victim, or rather the result, of his own vague experiment, and has also mutated and is known by his alter ego, Floronic Man. He is brought in to perform the autopsy of Swamp Thing and discover what he can about him. He is also a vegetated being who uses a special spray to create artificial human skin to hide his true form. Not too much is told on what led to his condition, but it's obvious he was normal at one point, and he is trying to become more and more plant-like, which is basically the opposite of Swamp Thing's story, who is trying to find his way back to humanity. And what he discovers doing the autopsy is very significant to the origin of Swamp Thing, and I thought it was very creative and turned a by-the-numbers origin into something very much more imaginative, horrific, and more scientific. You see, Dr. Alec Holland was working on a special chemical for plants, a biorestorative formula that promotes crop growth. And boy, does it work. Tested on many plants just outside the lab, the plants became thriving, hungry, more advanced in some type of way. Well, when Dr. Holland was caught in that explosion, he died. And when he sank to the bottom of the swamp, he was dead. But these plants started to digest his decomposing body, and eventually his remains were consumed by the plants, which took on the fragments of his personality and identity. So the vegetation gained consciousness and became self-aware and thought it was Alec Holland, forming its own human-like body and even organs. And this whole time it's been trying to find its way back to humanity, yet all along it was never human in the first place. One of the ways it's explained in the book is kind of like how some ancient cultures that believe in cannibalism believe if you consume someone else, you'll gain their wisdom and intelligence. And that's kind of what happens with these plants when they consume the corpse of Dr. Alec Holland. And when Swamp Thing learns this, the creature does not take it well. How would you feel if you had all these memories and a sense of identity, yet you find out they're all false? So what's great about this story is Swamp Thing still finding its purpose and meaning. Like I said, I don't want to get too spoilery, but quite a bit happens over the course of this book. Like I said, it has two storylines dealing with different antagonists. Like I said, you have the Floronic Man. Then there's this evil demon monkey known as the Chimera, and it feeds on fear, and it gets summoned by a Ouija board. So that's also a pretty cool storyline. You get an appearance from Etrigan the Demon, who you may know from Justice League Dark, which Swamp Thing is also affiliated with. Abigail has an interesting storyline and relationship with Swamp Thing, and her relationship with her husband Matt Cable, who has these weird visions and the horrors that are brewing there. And that's what's cool about Swamp Thing. You hear the title and you assume that most of the horror probably revolves around the character Swamp Thing. But really, these other horrific things happen and he kind of steps in later. But the story will kind of focus on the other horrors and characters, especially the second half of the book. Swamp Thing isn't really involved until he steps in to do the hero thing because that's what he is, a protector of the green, and occasionally the flesh, but a creature who wants there to be a peaceful coexistence between all species on Earth. And when something threatens that, he is willing to step in and fight, in which to me, he finds his purpose. And even though he is the protector of the swamp and everything green, it doesn't ever get preachy about the environment at all, but still a reader could take that away from reading this nonetheless. And that's what I love about this. There's a lot of things going on, and that's why I consider this a great horror comic. So yeah, this is a lot of fun, and I really can't wait to move on to book 2. So if you like comic books, or you just like to read and you're looking for something this Halloween season that's creepy, check out Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. It will not disappoint, as the perfect atmosphere for this time of year. And it's just really good. Whether you like horror comics or not, this is a great story, and I highly recommend it. So that's DC's Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, Book 1. Have you read it? Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below, or tell me what's your favorite horror comic book. This is AnTalk, the weekly comic conversation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and in the meantime, I think dinner's ready.